right? So, hi, thank you for joining us. And to our last session for the week on libraries, we have a really interesting conversation, hopefully, with Aqui Thami, who's joining us from Bombay right now. Hi, Aqui Thami, thank you for being with us today on this chat. Uh, just to give you guys a little introduction about why we are here. Uh, Guftgu is a series of online conversations that we do have at Offset Projects, which look at conversations with artists, with publishers, with libraries, which are a specific focus for this week, to talk about how reading practices and book disciplines have helped create a certain engagement for artists and the rest of the world in many ways. Um, we have Akwi joining us from Bombay today, but Aqui Thami is an indigenous artist from the Thangmi people of the Himalayas. Her practice is centered within the culture of do-it-yourself, self-publishing, and guerrilla posters. She firmly believes in creating art that is grounded in the act of doing while addressing socio-political issues. Uh, Akwi is also the founder for the Sister Library, which is I guess I saw a pop up of this library some time back, and I was very intrigued. But we'll have Akwi tell us a lot more about her own journey as an artist and how the politics of that journey has impacted the library as well today. Um, I'm gonna kind of go straight into the conversation because I do know Akwi uh, might not be able to extend this conversation for longer. So, hi Akwi, are you
Hello.
having a nice evening today?
Yeah, it's been all right so
Yeah.
far. Also, it's Aki.
Aki, I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, Aki.
yeah,
Okay, I got
yeah.
it. I think it's we need to figure out methods of maybe looking at the language in which we also then communicate a little differently.
No, that's okay. I don't mind correcting.
Thank you, thank you. So, Akwi, Aki, am I right on that? Sorry.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start with your early engagement with also understanding the politics of your own indigenous identity, and how that's influenced your practice as an artist. Just for people who are joining us to get a context of where you come from and what informs your work.
Yeah, well, the way I experienced art when growing up, being an indigenous person, was very different in the sense that we were always like always shown ways of being together with people in the form of like storytelling or music or dancing or ceremony. So there was always place to participate and share with each other, and that is pretty much what informed not just my artistic practice but also my life and how I live it, and why I want to always be connected with people. And that's also one reason why I can't have like a secluded studio practice where I can sit for hours and work on one piece of work and then like come out and share with people. I have not been able to do that, even though I have worked in like studio setups and traveled in a bit of different places. But yeah, I guess because art as an idea was so much more different growing up with indigenous parents and in indigenous family and within a tribe and amongst other indigenous peoples. So yeah, that is how like I experienced it. And um, for the longest time I did not even really think at uh, of of it as like a proper art practice as such,
Right.
but I just thought like this is life. But it was only like when I started looking at participatory art practice and started reading about it, and I was like, oh wait a second, like this is life for us. And
Right.
yeah. So like because art can be an intimidating space, especially if you are an independent practitioner and an outsider artist like me. I am self-taught, My practice is a feminist, participatory, social art practice. It is within that space. So if I'm already outside of the so-called normative definition of what an art practice is, it is a tricky space to exist and claim your space also as an artist, as a maker or thinker. So yeah, like it has always been tricky. A lot of people still think what I do cannot be called art per se, but yeah, I call it art because it is like art for me is not just something that has to be like put up on a fancy wall of a fancy house, but it's more of like a life work. Yeah. So
Thank you.
I hope
Thank
that
you.
answers your question.
I think it does. In fact, it kind of in some ways begins to throw light on why your own ideas of the library, engage with also a lot of community-based programming. The other work apart from the library, you are also part of another collective that looks at publishing, but even the nature of publishing that happens within that is extremely uh, participatory and democratic for sure, but I think it's also very inward looking and reflective. So the idea is not about the grandness of an aesthetic, which invariably goes into, the art, the understanding or the validation of maybe a work as art. And I think, like how you were saying, like a lot of people don't consider what you're doing as art because I think there's maybe their parameters for establishing art are different, and for some people it's the aesthetic, but for you, I mean, the engagement, community interaction, and also the reflective inquiry is kind of at the core of that practice as well.
Mhm.
And uh, you know maybe it would be interesting to know how you associate with books and the role that books may have had in your life in particular, but also the impact that you see it can have on a larger scale, and how you got into the self-publishing aspect of your work as well.
Yeah, it is really it's been nice to think about like why the written word has been like so important to me. I did not quite realize, but now when I look back, I know that my father, like my pa, until now is almost like the community scribe because he's one of the literate people, and a lot of people come to him to write letters and petitions and like a lot of different things, applications. And so I have seen him like spend a lot of time writing. Like every morning he's just like busy writing a letter, writing an application for someone, like, and it just happened like since I was a kid, and it's still the same. And back then I did not realize how important written word was, and like why this form of like documentation in writing is so important. But like when I left home when I was 15, I migrated from my place when I was 15, and I came to the mainland, and I was like immersed as a child in a culture that was so different, which is so patriarchal. I had to learn a language which was not my own. And up until today, like because of the racism that indigenous people face in the mainland, they can just look at me and tell that, like, not only do I look different, but also I sound different in my diction when I speak in Hindi. So that has been an issue. So like all of these like othering, and with that like the violence that I was subjected to in all the spaces, um, I somehow found kind of a healing space within books. And like when I was totally lost and I could not really make sense of the reality that I was in, because I really as a child did not understand why I was being subjected to so much hate and why I could not just live with my parents. And I had to learn how to do everything for myself, like take care of myself as an individual. And I can't even begin to like explain how like indigenous women, indigenous children are sexualized because of the trafficking that we face. And yeah, it's pretty bleak and it's harsh, and it was a really really terrible space. And had I not found books that enriched me and emboldened me, I would not probably be alive today. So it became a space for me to go to and read and like reflect and find people who have experienced similar things like I have, and had a kind of like an articulation of what they have undergone. So books were a healing space for me. And then I realized with like a lot of reading and a lot of reflecting, also like it brought me that time where I could just like be and forget about the world outside of me. And yeah, so that really pushed me into making as well. So like that was the space where I started making zines and making publications, and started circulating, because the idea of making zines is not just like making it and then selling it, right? Like it is actually having a conversation with someone who would be attracted to the idea in the zine, and then you have an exchange of thought while you're like, and then there's some kind of spark and some kind of change that is made. And yeah, so that aspect of zine making was like super nice, like super enriching for me as well. So I kind of stuck with it, I guess. Like it's been a couple of years now that I've been making zines. I've been into publishing. I have been doing it very seriously as a practice, but yeah, reading definitely was life changing for me, and it still is. Back then I used to read a book every day, because it was like I had that kind of like a hunger, I think. I was just like I had to read so much. But now, because of like, I wish I had all that time, and I was also younger, so I don't know. I really enjoyed that space where I could read a lot. Now, not so much. I read, but I can't finish a book in a day now.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe you're busy, doing other aspects of book engagement. So I don't know if you consider that as part of spending time with books, because I mean, they're really important, of course.
Yeah.
But it's a different relationship. Like, it's actually very powerful how you're sharing about that space becoming your healing ground in many ways. And I feel that books do allow you to kind of transport yourself into uh, imaginary worlds, real worlds, and find maybe through those worlds a resolution, within our own everyday lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, one aspect of this that I am definitely curious about in your case was you did mention how you grew up with waking up to your father kind of caught up in the act of writing, and it could vary from an application for something that might be government related to maybe putting an ideology of his own thoughts put together.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, of course, when you come into Bombay, or any other city, in fact, for that matter, um, the way that language is used changes so much. Even I feel like the connotations of the same words echo different, maybe psychological spaces also sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think with books, it's it's a good thing, and maybe it's not a good thing, is that to access many books that deal with literature, you need to have access to the language and the education of that language. And in many cases, when the language that you're accessing is not part of what you grew up with, it can begin to alter how you think and how you look at the world as well. And how is it that one can then, or how is it that you have, let's say, in that case, managed to kind of keep the connection to your own language, or your own dialect, because there is so much in how language is created around a land, that helps in who we become as well. And I mean, my thing with libraries is that invariably they might have more institutional language based archives, but they never end up really looking at indigenous languages or regional languages. And whether it might be that they don't have access to it, or I don't know if that's a legitimate reason or not, or it might be that people might not receive it because there might not be as many readers of that language. And so uh, I mean, I'm just curious to know how you look at the library and the place of the library within this, maybe
Mhm.
even the role of the art book or the artist book, a visual book within this.
Right. So, like the way I see Sister Library is not just as a as a library space, but also as a work that actually questions what a library could be, because a lot of people may not associate colonization with libraries, but I definitely do, because libraries are a colonizing space and they continue to be because of the content of the library and also the people who access the library, and also like the environment of the library, the design, the structure, the architecture of the library, and how gated it is, and all of that definitely. But also what an idea of a library is, the concept of the library in itself is not um, really something that is of the space. As an indigenous person, for us libraries have always been our grandmothers, our elders, because they are the knowledge keepers. So we did not have a physical space as a library so much, but a person that we could sit with and learn together with. And yeah, like we have uh, faced a lot of violence, and our libraries were burnt down, our libraries were killed, they were murdered, and then people have witnessed that. And along with that, there has also been losing of like a lot of knowledge resources and losing of language, and there's been like a lot of erasure in that way. So it is a, and after all of these erasures, there has been people coming together and trying to situate these spaces and like trying to recreate and rethink these knowledge systems and putting together what has been left. And after this effort has been put in place, there's again an appropriation by like some researcher or with a Fulbright scholarship, or a researcher from JNU doing anthropology, or someone from IIT or from TIS coming and taking this body of knowledge and presenting it as their own. And like, we all know of like policies in India as well, like how patents work and all of these things. So it is a space of colonization. It is a brutal space. It is not a space that is healthy for me as an indigenous person. I will not say that I don't feel um, like inherited intergenerational trauma when I visit these spaces. So Sister Library is definitely a space that questions what this space means and like how we can change it and disrupt this idea, which is why if you have visited Sister Library, the physical space, or like an installation, you'll see that it does not resemble any other library one could have visited, because the like I try to disrupt what a library is really like in every sense. So like one of the installations at Kochi Binale, we had a neon light put up, and I always work with a very bright pink color for the library, because I want it to be that space that like really captures people's attention. um, yeah, like I'm really uncomfortable with the way libraries are designed, how the walls are very white, and like uh,
Almost a
it's
clinical treatment into an engagement that's actually meant to be so intimate in many
right.
ways.
Yeah, so yeah, did I stray from your question? Yeah, so language wise too, like coming from a colonized space in South Asia with no acknowledgement of the Arya occupation of thousands of years of the Aryans coming and like subjecting the indigenous people under so much violence, with the rise of the Hindu nationalism, and like these like many folds of occupation, like the Mughals, and the like after the Aryas, the Mughals, and then the Christians. So all of these nations coming. So like for us to still be alive is already an act of defiance. And in that, we also have had a lot of different things together with colonization. We've had plantation slavery, especially from the space that I come from. So that has definitely erased a lot of language. My parents don't speak my language of my people, so we were not taught to speak it. What we speak is a form of a plantation language where it's like a mix of a lot of Nepali and a lot of different tribal languages mixed together. So there's like a bit of Sherpa and Bhutia and like Zonka, Tibetan, a bit of Thami, Gurung. It's all like a mix. So yeah, and like the more you learn about yourself and the more you, I have so much of like consciousness about who I am, because I also got a master's degree in Dalit and tribal studies from this, and so I had the opportunity to really delve into who we are as peoples. But for a lot of our people, because of like the conditions, the social conditioning and the position that we are in, we don't have that opportunity to really look at who we are as peoples. And so when it comes to language, I think English was always the language which was more comfortable to me, given um, the missionaries.
Yes, geographical histories
Yeah,
and cultural histories of the land, I'm sure,
yeah.
definitely
So
plays.
definitely like more comfortable than Hindi any day, more comfortable than any other Indo-Aryan language. English has been a space, like I think I even think in English to a large extent, because like I migrated really early. I did not have people to converse with in my language, but there's definitely been uh, like a craving to learn my language. So someday, if someone finds it a good project, then I would like really like it if they sponsor me, and then I can just like spend time learning my language. And like yeah,
That would
because
be quite, I think that would be great, not just for you, but I think for all of us as well, who can then maybe have access to a completely maybe familiar but unreferenced set of contexts to do with land and emotionality. I think that's
yeah.
the gamut that opens out with with these
Mhm.
introductions of different languages, but core ideas of maybe human experience.
Yeah, I mean like there is work being done. There is a lot of people relearning their histories and languages, people going back. There is a lot of movement of people from like young people from the Northeast getting their education in the mainland and going back and doing things, which is like a really exciting thing to see as well. There has been a restating of indigeneity and reclaiming of indigeneity, especially given that how now we are seeing a rise of the upper caste Hindus claiming indigeneity too, and this space, it is wild that like that
Yeah.
this is happening, and how this totally complements the Hindu nation project that is underway. Yeah, it is terrifying, and
It
yeah,
is. It definitely is.
yeah,
Even for me, it definitely is. Terrifying would be a very nice way to put it. Let's just say, Uh, and I mean, and then I know you've also, I mean, so let's get to sister library, and I mean, and talk about like, so how do you is this how do you even access resources that can help you create a completely feminist library? I mean, what is a feminist library? What is it in, what is, I get where it comes from, but in structure and in let's say programming, how does it change the dynamic of the library entity?
mm. Yeah, it's interesting you say like what is a feminist library, because I really did not have a place to look at for an
Right.
example, especially because I was not looking at a model which would be funded by a larger corporate body doing some fishy business in an indigenous village and forcing relocation of indigenous people. I really did not want that kind of blood money. And so I always wanted a space which is community owned and which is community run, so that there is no single ownership of the space. So like, yeah, I have this concept, I've conceptualized it, I have the books, because like I mentioned earlier, I was reading voraciously, I was reading a lot. And like you mentioned, I am a part of a collective called Bombay Underground, and we have been working with the booksellers, the street booksellers, for quite some time in Bombay now. I don't know if there are any Bombay Walas listening to us, but then like Bombay used to have a lot of booksellers a few years back, and then because of the cleansing of the city, like they were not relocated; they were forced off the streets. Their books were thrown away, and in that time, we put together monies and we bought a large chunk of books from them. And we were anyway working with books, so like we already had a good relationship. But since then, we almost became like family. And because like, you know, it's all about building that community, right? Like their livelihood was at stake, and then we could not but stand with them in solidarity then. So like since then, we've been very close. They understand what exactly is my need, what I like reading. So if they see a Toni Morrison, they'll just call me, and then they'll be like, do you have a copy of this? You must have a copy of this in your library.
Right.
Or like, yeah, so they know exactly what I like reading and what I look for. So that is how I get my books. It's like all from independent booksellers, street booksellers. um, and like the space, like I said, I wanted it to be community owned and community run, because like you cannot, like at least for me, I feel like the model of feminism that is practiced and popularized in the mainstream is so intrinsically connected and intertwined with capitalist practices. So there is always like something to be sold and something to be bought in order to be a feminist. And like that is an uncomfortable space for me, coming from poverty. And I did not want a space like that. And I wanted to actually like reconstruct this whole idea of ownership and property. And which is why I made a crowdfunder and opened the possibility to have this ownership of the space to everyone, like anyone who would be interested to put in some monies or come and spend time, resources, give their time to the library. The library is theirs, and they have to take care of the library as much as I take care of it. So yeah, that was the that was the thought behind it. And I guess like that is what I think of feminist spaces. And the other thing was it being accessible. So we are working on the accessibility bit, especially when it comes to people with hearing loss. We have not been able to have a lot of like I don't know if you know, but like we have Sister Radio as well, which is like a podcast series
Yes.
from Sister
I
Library.
I noticed it on the Instagram page recently.
So like we're trying to make our programming more and more and more accessible, because it's only fair that we extend the resources that we have for everyone to be able to have access to it. Yeah, and so in that we pay special attention to disability, but we also don't forget to like think about people who are economically deprived, or like caste structures and like racism within these and how they function. So really make it a really comfortable and a safe space for everyone who is visiting, everyone who is sharing. Yeah, so
Thank you. I'm curious to know because I mean, of course, you found a physical space for the library uh, almost a year and a few months ago, and before that, you were functioning out of a traveling library, and I was curious to know how does the nature of engagement with the library change in these scenarios, and I mean, was there anything in specific that led you to move from the migratory library to this one
yeah.
physical space?
We still traveling, like I started with the traveling library because I like when I first started it in 2018, like when I started traveling in 2018, I was really keen on sharing the works that I had with a larger audience. So I sat down and thought of places that I could go to. And then I thought I would go to 6 different cities in India. And then, according to the city, I curated a collection of 100 works, including zines, publications, community printed material, and books. So it was like the curation was around how I interacted with the city and how the city interacted with me. And with that, I felt like the city needed to look at these works and celebrate these works in particular and these women. So yeah, like, so every city got a different mix of books. And while traveling, I also got to meet a lot of different people, like old time feminists, who were in the women's movement in India, a lot of young women, college going women who came and helped out with everything. Uh, and different art practitioners, and also different independent book spaces where I could go and collect works of women from, works of women that are not really popularly available in mainstream spaces. So yeah, like that was like really nice. And if it was up to me, then I would have so much liked to have a sister library in every
I was
district.
thinking about it, and I was like, it would have been so great that every city that you visit would have become maybe
Yeah.
another extension. Uh,
Yeah, it was like really great. And it also, like, when I started it first, I did not know if people would want to come to a space like this, because I also like, there was excitement from a lot of people, but alongside, I also got a lot of hate. Like, I still get a lot of hate because it's not a comfortable space to exist as a feminist library, because people feel like they are being pushed out of this space. And then a lot of men and women ask me, like, why does it have to be a sister library? Like, why can't you include men? And a lot of times it's also like, oh, but you can include men from a certain caste category, like, why are you doing this? So
right.
yeah.
Okay. I had not
So
anticipated that, but I can imagine people
mhm.
saying this, but I guess I've not anticipated it.
Yeah, it happens like more often than I would have liked. But yeah, and even with the space that we have in Bombay, we started the space last May, but we had to move out of our previous space because we were asked to leave by the society, because a lot of people who were visiting the library were people who came from economically deprived class, and also like visibly different people. So like, you know, either people from Dharavi, where I also work in. So like a lot of kids from Dharavi and didis from Dharavi would come, and it was not a comfortable time for the society where sister library was located. So we were asked to leave because it apparently made the people in the society feel unsafe. And so yeah, it has been difficult to have the physical space. Yeah, but it is also a really nice feeling to go to the library and meet everyone who comes to the library, because it's not just people who are in Bombay who come to the library and spend time there. It's also sometimes people who travel all the way from Brazil, and then they are like, oh, I read about sister library and I wanted to come so much, so I saved up my money and like my leave, and I traveled here. There have been like people who have come from Chandigarh to spend a week at the library. So to see a growing interest in a community run space, and wanting like to see that people actually consolidate their holidays to be able to come here and volunteer at the library, uh, it's amazing. And also like a lot of these cities that I visited, and also cities that I could not visit when traveling, has been so much interest by the young women that they have run like fundraisers for sister library to support sister library. And that has been totally organic. Like it's just a bunch of women in a city coming together to support a library that they may not even ever have access to. So that I see as feminist action, like
Yeah.
yeah, just to make sure that there is a space like this and it's open and it's running. So it's a very fulfilling experience every time I
Right.
go there.
No,
Yeah.
it definitely sounds like that. And what you spoke about in terms of how it's kind of grown and the connections that draw people to it, whether they are from the same city where it is based or they're actually sitting and thinking about it and thinking about visiting it. It's actually really, really overwhelming and heartening to hear that. Um,
Mhm.
on a side note, I'm just going to let the people who are here, just let them know that um, the Sister Library is open to contributions, and in our chat window, we've given a link. It's a milap.org link, which is where all the contributions are accepted from.
Yes.
So you can just click on that and head over to that once we're done in a few more minutes. Um, I also, we've spoken about this earlier today, but I did want to talk about some of the programs that you have going at Sister Library because, in many ways, I think the disruption of the library also helps that it expands itself to more manners of engagement and maybe looking at storytelling from a very different perspective as well.
Mm.
Because whether we look at books as visual books or art books or scientific books or history, I mean, at the very core of how we communicate is storytelling, because I think that's how, as a people, we that's how we remember and that's how we create our own identities. And I find it, I mean, the programs that you have been conducting or running or engaging with at the library in many ways look at how storytelling can become a part of your life, but through different, not different, let's just say, through formats that have not come into city structures that easily. And it'd be nice to hear a little bit about that, and also uh, maybe talk about how these methodologies came into your vision
Mm.
or ideation of the library as well.
Yeah, like everything that I do, like like I mentioned in the very beginning, that everything that I do has been influenced by my positionality in the world as an indigenous person. So definitely, like the library as a space too, but also everything that happens inside of the library and how we think of things that are going on in the library. So, for instance, we do this thing called community reading, where we sit together with the text and we sit in a circle and then we read the text aloud, taking turns. And that is something that we have also done as like indigenous Himalayan people, and also within different indigenous groups. We see storytelling happening like that, and like passing of knowledge and sharing knowledge. So this reading in a community particularly is helpful also for a lot of people who cannot read. And yeah, and it's also a space where um, you feel you feel immediately connected to the person reading, and also like with the larger group, and then like the text. So yeah, and that is uh, like people would not really think of it as an art practice, but for me it certainly is, because like it's like shaking some foundational beliefs that people have even about the idea of reading, and then like like challenging them to like rethink reading, and that also like rethink possessing books, or like anything that should actually be widely available to people. um, yeah, hopefully that it has been able to do that to people who participate in this.
I think
But
I think I mean, the little I have read and heard, I think it definitely has.
yeah, and also like very simple things like eating together also, like in a very class caste, race stratified society, even sharing food is something which is like super taboo. The kind of food that we eat, like we have proper strict regulations where certain food is banned, and which affects certain groups of people like indigenous people, the Muslim community, the Dalit community. So yeah, like food and untouchability, they go hand in hand. And so like to even have a space where like different groups of people can come together, sit and eat and share, and that is knowledge sharing as well, because while you're eating together you're asking questions about, hey, like what is in this, it smells amazing, it tastes amazing, or like the way someone has decided to present a food, like like the way I pack vada pav may not be exactly the same way you pack vada pav. So there's that difference in that. And so that kind of sharing is not really institutionally thought of as knowledge sharing, but it is very much so. So yeah, like small things like that, but also like things that make me happy, because like who wouldn't like sitting together with people and eating?
Right. So, I mean, it's actually quite interesting. We had a artist residency last year at Offset, which was in Goa actually, and we'd invited um, the Edible Archives. I don't know if you know of them or not. And so
Mhm.
they'd actually come, and the idea of the residency in that sense was to look at how we remember food, very connected to their core principle as well. And I think one of the methodologies that we were talking about at that point of time, because we wanted it to be a project where the community engaged a lot with the history of how we remember rice, very integral to everyday life and staple diet for many of us. And I think one of the interesting things in that we were talking about was also to see how the crop had changed over a period of time, right? And one of the questions that we were asking within the village where we were living was, because the residency was in a farming village of sorts. Its primary source of survival is through farming and rice and paddy fields in specific. So it was interesting to notice, because I think we were talking to them about how they remember rain impacting soil, and it was an interesting relationship to understand, because that's how you gauged if the crop that was used, the seed that was used to grow the rice had changed, because with more hybrid versions, the how you take care of the crop changes completely. And just by kind of getting people to visually remember the intensity of rain, how that had changed and impacted their crop over the years, we got into a conversation about, you know, what was then, how was the rice then treated, and it's, the other elements that go around it, the rituals that go around it, the stories that emerge from it, whether it's folklore or some real person's life. And it's always interesting to see how from something like food you can suddenly expand to conversations around individual and collective histories for that matter.
Mhm.
That it's a very unassuming subject maybe in one space, that just talking about food or eating together, but it's
Mhm.
so central to our existence that it can often kind of take us into very different tangents from there itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I feel like food is super political, which is why it's not taken seriously. And I even think that a lot of times it is deliberate. Um, it has to be deliberate, that a lot of things that have so much potency is not given credibility and not acknowledged as knowledge systems, or like places to really think around, because if we actually do, then it will be disruptive to systems in place. So yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I think even in the larger, the popular, the majority popular, religion that is being propagated in India. Like, I mean, even within Hinduism, there are so many histories where, uh, you know, the best part of a sacrifice would actually go to a priest, so it's also kind of looking at a complete erasure of a particular history to kind of establish a sense of power and hierarchy, and not just over other communities, but also maybe to change the relatively, maybe relative to right now, but open-ended aspects of faiths that were kind of incorporated into religion, let's just say. And I think that in itself, it's not even looking at saying we are superior, but even within that, what you choose to conceal and what you choose to hide and erase, kind of is very, very often more expressive about where your intentions are coming from, I think, in many ways. But of course, moving from the potluck programs that you have to the radio, to reading rooms that are that come on, and publishing. Even I think within publishing and zine making activities, you do have workshops at the library as well, in some cases.
We have had some zine making exercises while traveling with Sister Library, but not really at the library in Bombay. But we are soon going to start Sister Press, which is going to be the first Rhizo community owned press in South Asia, probably. And
I mean, I have not heard of.
I'm super excited about it because like Rhizo is a very environmentally friendly printing process, and you might have heard of it. So yeah, I'm super interested and excited about this, and it's going to start this September, and we have plans. So we are soon going to have like the library, which can be used as a resource center, and alongside we'll have the press. And yeah, I don't know.
That sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, so we'll soon have like more of printing and more of zine making at the library, probably like a lot of posters to put around the city, and hopefully like by then the global pandemic will have
let's hope so, become not so global or not at all, and hopefully I mean, I've heard that they say the new versions of the virus are now being detected, and so they can take a little breather before they decide to emerge out again, because it might have a big. I mean, I hope we're able to survive through this.
It's strange, no? Because like especially with like community work, I guess it's become like so difficult now because everything has moved on to a digital platform, and that really cuts out from the possibility of people who may not have access to, say, electricity or screens and the internet, or even like time to do this, like the possibility of them participating. And that is majorly everyone that I know, like all of my family, all of the people that I'm so connected with here in Bombay, none of them have the time and resources to participate in anything that I've been doing the past few months now. And that is like a really sad place, because the community, the idea of community in itself is being redefined because of the pandemic. And yeah, it's not a happy space.
It's not a happy space, but hopefully things will begin to resume, and we will be able to see each other, meet in physical spaces, hug, just engage with each other. And I mean, it's interesting that you did talk about how we define ourselves as communities is changing so much during this pandemic. And I see that so much around me as well. And in many ways, when that changes, how you orient yourself and how you activate yourself, even on an everyday basis, changes so much. Just to be in a space which has a collective energy of people who are driven towards like one idea can sometimes make a really rotten day turn, the other side. And it becomes even more and more difficult, I think, as things get more isolated. I don't know how much of this will completely change, in a post-pandemic world, because I feel like this is now kind of slowly getting incorporated into everyday lives, and being
Mm,
expected in certain spaces, as part of community engagement and interaction.
mhm,
And the more isolated one becomes, I think uh, sometimes books, most times, books can offer uh, kind of like a sense of belonging to a different world, or a world consumed in a book.
mm,
And
mm,
I think that is why, I mean, for me personally, I feel like the artist, the visual book, let's just say, allows for that capacity to kind of engage with maybe softer elements of being together that maybe sometimes, a text-based book cannot, owing to just
mhm,
pure power dynamics of language, more than
mhm,
anything else.
mhm.
And I'd like you to share. I know we're running out of time, so guys, just to let you know, I don't think we'll be able to take any questions, but you can write to Sister Library. They're on Instagram as well. But I just wanted just for you to share a little bit about like the zines that you do create. I know you have a
Uh,
couple with you. That would
yeah,
be really
I can show you some of the zines that I have here. So this one is, I don't know if you can read it, but then it says
nice.
What the Lord Said, and it is excerpts from writings by Audre Lorde, who is a Black feminist, lesbian writer, just like feminist foremother, who has had a lot of impact on everything that I do. I really appreciate her writing and her life and everything that she did really. Yeah, this one. And this is
I have
book.
that.
Sweet. It has drawings done by the kids in Dharavi, and it is looking at cats because we made this when there was a cat that came to the art room in Dharavi, and then I think her name was Sujata. Yeah, the kids called her Sujata, and there was a lot of distance between the kids and the cat because, like, the language that the kids knew to communicate with the cat was one of distrust and even anger sometimes, and then they kind of learned this because of the way elders behave with them, uh, because that's how you behave with the person who is lesser powerful than you are. And then, like, we had to relook at what are the aspects of this being that you like the cat, and then we came up with drawings. That one, and this one is just a one page zine. It's called Yum. um, and this is on biryani because like food. Yeah, it's just like a bunch of pictures, and then
And was this also made out of like a community?
this one is my work, but then we, like, when I was in London, what I did was I worked on a project called Food is Our Archive, and then we went around eating biryani in East London, and we looked at different kinds of biryani and how there was a community history right there, which was so rich and which to the outsider would not really look at, like, be seen as history or like knowledge at all, but for people there it was something that was passed on through generation, or something that they carried from like their country of origin. So there were like so many different kinds of biryani. There's like Dhaka biryani, and then there was Karachi biryani and Hyderabadi biryani and Punjabi biryani, all on the same street. And so we spent a lot of time eating biryani, and then I thought it would be a nice space for people to come and eat all these biryani, because, like, there is a perception of like Indian food in the West, and then they don't really understand the nuance and, like, what really goes on to like saving these recipes. And like and it's also almost magical, no? Every time you say biryani, like, it just puts a big
Everyone has their own
smile on.
versions and
Yeah.
their own histories and their own kind of taboos of like what cannot go in the biryani and what must be in the biryani.
Yeah, definitely. But also it's almost this magical word, like, to any person coming from this part of the world, you can just say biryani and suddenly like there's a
Yeah.
spark, like,
Yeah.
something happens. So yeah, I was interested in that. So like we opened up the space and we ate a lot of biryani and we spoke a lot about food. And then we also ended up making a zine for everyone to take home with. So that was the community project. I came back and I'm still in love with biryani. So I made the zine. It's called
Right.
Biryani with Love.
Maybe I'll come for your next biryani cook-off. Please do it when people can travel. You know?
Yeah, definitely. We should eat together. And
Yeah.
this one is called Boju.
Have this
Uh,
one as well.
Sweet. So this one has a bunch of drawings of my grandmother's. It is just a collection of writings that I thought our grandmothers would want to say to us. Then this one is called Aesthetically Yours, and this was actually a video project which was also featured in the Venice Biennale. It has drawings of mummies and grandmothers done by kids, but in video they had interviews of their mothers and grandmothers, so like that. And so like the kid would interview their mothers and grandmothers and learn about their history of how they traveled to Dharavi and their family history of like, because a lot of times the things that you know about your family are also things that are told to you by a man in the family, and then like whatever the woman thinks of the family or of her journey, it's totally lost and invisibilized. And I wanted the kids, and in doing so, not only are you forgetting a part of who you are, but also it dehumanizes a person in your family who you only think of as someone who is there to comfort you, wash your clothes, provide you food, and someone you can yell at. So I wanted, especially the boys who come to the art room, to like really relook at all the members in their family. So I asked them to interview their mothers and grandmothers, and then they learned so much about the contribution. I learned so much about their contribution to Dharavi as a space when they migrated, what they migrated with, and what were the things that were important to them, what happened during the riots in Bombay, how did they cope with it, what was the kind of community support that they provided as women. And these are all remarkable stories, but altogether forgotten because they are women. So yeah, that was that project. And finally, this one, it
Nom
is
nom.
on, yeah, it is on making momos again. Like I said, I like food. And yeah, it is just a bunch of drawings and like talking about momos. Yeah, that's some zines, but we have a lot more. We have 700 zines, and
Wow.
we have 1,000 books. Oh no, I have to go now.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I just noticed it's 7. So we're gonna quickly wrap up. Just before you go, just Nasser wanted to know if there's a place where one can see the curated selections of what you presented in the 6 cities. Is that
uh,
accessible in any way?
no, not really. The thing with like having to run around and do these things all by yourself is also you don't end up doing a lot of these documentations. So
Right, right.
yeah, we have only now started getting volunteers who are happy to do this kind of work, like sit behind their laptops and like put down things. But all of our volunteering has been actually like lifting books and doing the
Yeah.
heavy lifting so far. So no, we don't have anything available anywhere. We don't have a website. We don't have monies for a website. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing, the world of the sister library and your own histories with us. And I really look forward to many more conversations with you. Guys, those who've joined us head to the link that is there, which is the contribution link for Sister Library. They're doing some amazing work. They don't have a website, but they do have an Instagram page, so you can hit them there and get to know what they're doing as they change many, many different parameters for us. Thank you so much.
Bye. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for
Thank you.
joining, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.